Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursdays Live with Chug. Each week, we cover pressing topics that matter to you and your business. I'm Arianna Gonzalez with Chug Attorneys and CPAs, tuning in from our San Diego office. And joining me today is our Executive Manager, Carmen Lopez, and Immigration Attorney, Jioselin Juarez, from our headquarters, Los Angeles, California. Hi there, Carmen and Jioselin, and welcome.
I welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Excited to be here today.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet virtually be able to talk today. Looking forward to having a great presentation.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. For today's topic, we're going to be talking about mastering the E-2 Treaty Investor Visa. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. We are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. This conversation is for informational purposes only and does not create an attorney-client relationship. So please, if you have questions, comment them below or email us anytime at info@chug.com so we can help you out. So let's start with the basics and eligibility. Can you guys talk about what the E-2 Treaty Investor Visa is and who it's designed for?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Ariana, for the first question. So the E-2 Treaty Investor Visa basically are for nationals from certain treaty countries. And by treaty countries, we mean that countries that have a U.S. treaty, either commerce or navigation. So it has to be individuals from certain countries that have citizenship, and they're interested in investing in a business in the U.S. So that's kind of who it's designed for.
So you talked about certain countries have this treaty. Can you talk about which countries have a treaty of commerce and navigation or a bilateral investment treaty with the United States, which allow our citizens to apply for this visa?
Yes, thank you, Ariana, for the question. Basically, there are many countries, but not all countries qualify. There is an exhaustive list of countries that qualify on the Department of State website. But some of the popular countries that we do a lot of are, for example, Canada is a popular one, Mexico, countries like United Kingdom, Japan, Turkey, Germany, just to name a few. But there are many, many more exhaustive lists on the website of the Department of State that does mention many others that qualify. Like we've also worked with Bolivia, Panama, and many others as well. But you'd have to check, with us, and we can definitely let you know if the country is that you're from and you want to invest in is on the list.
That's good to know that we have these options and that we can look into that. So, definitely reach out if you have any questions about that. Jioselin, can you touch on the basic eligibility criteria for the E-2 visa?
Yeah, so some of the basic criteria, I'm just going to go through some of them. Of course, we'll go extensively throughout the requirements individually. But of course, as I mentioned earlier on, they have to be a national of a country which we have a treaty with. So that means U.S. citizen. It would mean citizenship. U.S. passport is the most common documentation we submit. And then you have either already invested or you are in the process of investing in the business a substantial amount, and it is a bona fide enterprise. Bona fide, just not to get too technical, it is basically means that it's more than marginal, which basically means that you are able to cover more than just your salary operations of the business. And of course, that it is real, which basically means that you are gonna actually run it, right? That's really important, especially for a renewal of the E-2 later on in the process. And then also that you are 50% owner or more in the business. And then also that you are going to become to solely directed, be it in an executive position or a managerial position in the company that you hold the 50% in.
That's great to know. So it sounds like there is some financial requirements in that. Let's talk about those. How much investment is generally required to qualify for the E-2 visa? Can you guys give us some insight on that?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. There is no set amount in the regulations that you have to invest a certain amount of money. It really depends on the type of business you're opening. Certain criteria that you probably ask yourself, depending on how much it be, is it a new business that you're opening? Is it a business that you're buying? Is it a business that you're just gonna lease an office and start it from scratch? A lot of questions are needed in order to say, okay, is this enough for this type of business? It really matters on the type of business you're opening. We have done it with under 100,000. We've also done it over 100,000. Again, there is no amount. However, 100,000 is a good number for any business, even if the capital is low. For example, consulting business that may not need a whole lot of capital to start with. It is recommended that you invest a substantial amount. You know, it's the totality of the case, as we will discuss during this seminar, and discuss, you know, some of the things that they look at. But there is no set amount, Arianna.
That's great to know. You did mention something about it, depending on the kind of business that you're opening. So what kind of businesses are eligible for this E-2 investment visa? Is it all types of businesses? You know, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so I could answer that question, Ariana. So the type of businesses that we advise not to do, let's start with that, and then we could give you examples of what it is, right? You know, and this comes straight from, you know, the E-2 rules, regulations. So businesses that are nonprofit they don't apply. You can't do a nonprofit business and do an E-2 visa. It's not allowed. Or any business that's really speculative, which basically means that there's not going to be continuous work being done. So example, buying land and developing. It's really, you know, the market varies. It could be, you really have to prove that you're going to be maintaining and directing the operations consistently. And of course, you're going to have an issue of marginality, which basically means you have to have money for your business, right? So when it's kind of that, it's really much harder to get those. But examples of businesses that we have seen succeed, of course, are different kind of franchisees that people purchase to, right? You know, it's already, the ideas out there. So the way the franchisee that's really been successful, or restaurants, or dessert shops, tutoring, computer, how to like function a computer for small children. I mean, various kind of businesses. It's just the important part is the continuous part of the business maintaining operational, because profit is important. You know, if you're going to renew your visa later on, you need to make sure that you have profits in your business. So it's a lot of the time, you know, I speak with clients and I discuss what their idea is, and we can have that discussion on if they have a new idea that maybe they think it's new. I might have already seen it. So it's very, very open to what the idea they want to do for the business.
Thank you for sharing those examples. That's really helpful, and great to know that we have all of these options, you know, no matter what kind of business we're in. For the most part, you know, we can consider this visa. Definitely, if you have questions, reach out to us and we're happy to help you out with that. So let's talk a little bit about the application process. What documents are essential for a successful E-2 visa application?
So documents that are essential basically for that is you have to show documents to show all of the eligibility requirements, as Jioselin had mentioned before. Reiterating the requirements is, you know, you have to be 50%. That would be your passport. Being that you're already in the process of investing or have already invested in a business, so that would be your corporate documents to show that you already established the business. You know, another requirement is you have to show that trace the money that you're using to invest. You have to show tax returns, bank statements, anything. It really depends on the type of tracing that your funds you're going to use to invest into the business. For example, you might be using funds like a gift or a loan or money that you saved over time or rental properties or you sold your home. Whatever it is, you have to trace the documentation to show that the money is white money, not black money. You also have to show that it's not marginal, meaning that what are the revenues that this company will generate in the future? How many employees you're going to hire? So that's what shows the marginality, that it's a business that's going to be fruitful, that's going to grow over a period of time. And also your qualifications. How are you qualified to direct and manage this business? So there's all sorts of documents that are required. It's a document intensive process, but it's really easy when you talk to someone that kind of really does these. You know, for you might sound overwhelming and you might feel like, oh my gosh, this is really a lot.
Yes, lots of documents.
But if you just let us guide you through the process, really, you know, when you're dealing with someone that does this all the time, it's really not that bad. We could definitely get you through this successfully.
You're right, Carmen. That did sound like quite a few documents we need, a business plan, an investment proof, and what we're investing, company formation documents. A lot is involved in this. And we definitely need to make sure we have everything necessary if we want the highest chance of our visa being approved.
Mhm.
So regarding this process, what's the waiting time that we're looking at? How long does the application process usually take for this E-2 visa?
Sure, I can answer that. Basically, it varies. It depends on where you're going to file. There's two ways of filing an E-2. One way is to file it at the consulate. The other way is if you're already in the United States on a different visa and maintaining your status, you can change it to an E-2 visa in the US. If it's consular, that's really option one. That's the most popular. Is basically, it varies on the consulate. Okay, so every consulate is very different. COVID-19, when it was COVID-19 just a few months ago, it was 6 months, a year longer than that to get an appointment for an E-2 at a consulate. But now it has come down, luckily. For example, we just filed one in Canada very recently. It took about 3 weeks for us to get contacted by the consulate once we submitted the documents to them. And once they contacted us in 3 weeks, we were able to have access to the calendar to schedule the appointment. So that, again, varies from consulate to consulate. If it's a change of status in the United States, basically you would either file it regular processing, which could take several months. I mean, we have one right now that we filed regular processing based on the strategy of the case. We said we're going to file it regular. It's been at least 5 months now, and it's still pending, which was what we wanted to take a while. But if you do premium, it takes 15 business days or less to touch. If they issue a request for evidence for any reason, they also take 15 business days from the time they receive the request for evidence. If you file your family with you, and let's say your family's here and you're in the US and you're filing a change of status or extension of stay in the United States, the only thing is that if you file with your family premium, it does not premium your family. It only premiums the E-2 principal, which is the main investor, but it does not premium the family members, which is a wife and children.
That's really helpful to know about that option. Somebody might file it with premium, expecting everyone to be premium, and then so that's really helpful. Thank you for mentioning the importance of that, Carmen. So you guys have been working on these for quite some time, helping several people get this type of visa. Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls to avoid during this application process? Anything you've seen people do pretty often that would be helpful for us to know to avoid during this process?
Jocelyn could answer that.
Yeah, for sure. So some common things that I don't actually see, but I've heard from other attorneys because we're very prepared when it comes to our cases. But common things that I really help guide clients so that they don't have that issue, of course, is as Carmen mentioned, each consulate has their specific requirements. There's actually very limited page limitations for the documentation. Some of them only have 60, 50, 70, 80. It depends on the consulate. So you want to make sure that you're very, following the guidelines of what the consulate wants. So if they only want 50 or 60 pages, you only give them that. And some of them want it emailed and some of them want it mailed. So you want to make sure you give them that. Some of them you have to have tabs. So you want to make sure that you give it in the proper tab order. They're very specific. So those are things that you really want to help facilitate so that you don't have a rejection or a delay in your case, right? You're already investing that amount of money, so you want to make sure that you don't have those issues, which is really important. The other thing, which is super important, and I work a lot of time I spend with clients, it's tracing of funds. Tracing of funds, which what we mean is whatever money you're putting into the business, that you make sure that you have all the documentation in order to show that where the money derived from. So if you came from retirement, if you took it from your retirement savings, your savings, you sold property, your rental, whatever it is, you have all that documentation in order. And hopefully you put that money into your business account if you already have one. And the important thing, what I do, and I spend a lot of time, I'm a very visual learner. I have clients create a timeline of their tracing so that, in a very one pager, because it's probably 50 pages or more, in a very few pages, we have the client show that visually. So that's really important. That the officer may not have a lot of time, so you want to make sure that everything is met in a very simple manner. So that's another thing. And the amount investment, I think I don't want to reiterate too much, but as Carmen mentioned, you also want to make sure that it's clear the amount investment. You make sure that whatever you invested into, you have receipts. If you bought any equipment, you paid for your lease, you have all receipts, and Excel sheet is usually really helpful to kind of document your whole investment amount and where your money went to. So those are just some common things that I don't have really a ton of issues because I work with the client, but these are issues that can become issues if you don't make it simple for the officer.
That's really great advice, Jocelyn. And it's important, like you said, to keep everything organized and easiest as possible for the officer who's managing this. We definitely don't want them to jump through hoops to try to find our information. So that's really great advice. So you were talking about obviously attorneys help with the paperwork, and we work very closely with them to make sure that they have all the necessary documentation. Can you guys touch on the importance of the role that attorneys play in facilitating a successful E-2 visa application, just to give us some insight on what you guys do on the back end?
Yeah, I mean, I could expand on this. It kind of touches on my last point, but just to kind of say, it's very document intensive, as we already know, right? So, a lot of the time it's the little things on documentation, right? Making sure, if you have your documentation that you're incorporated correctly, that everything is in order, you have your EIN number. These are things that you probably already know when you're starting your business, but if you don't, we help guide you on that. But also, after you gather all this and you do your appointment, right, either email or mail the packet, it's good to have a perspective of the attorney. If you haven't been to an interview, any kind of interview for U.S. consulate, it's really important so that you're prepared for your interview. So, you want to make sure you have the listed documents that are only accepted when you go to your interview, that you arrive on time, or not really on time, but early, right? And also that that if you have family that's also applying with you, that your family's with you. I mean, children are exempt if they're under 14. So that's different. So really it's the reality of the process. You went through all this documentation, you invest so much money, it's really important to make sure that you don't, jeopardize anything, and that you have everything fulfilled in order, and that's required from start to beginning. And then even when you get you get the visa, all approved, it's also super important to make sure to then, I tell clients, once you got your visa, once you enter the US, that there's the CBP system, your I-94, your authorized stay period, that it's correctly reflected. So these are kind of reminders, even though you went through the whole process, for the client to remember as well, so that they don't have any issue of status when they enter the US.
So it sounds like there's quite a bit of effort and work done on the back end regarding this. There are some legal things that are more simple and we can probably handle them on our own. And then there are some things we really want to make sure we have attorneys involved to get the process done correctly and make sure we have everything that we need. So I appreciate you reiterating the importance of what you guys do on the back end regarding this. It gives us some perspective on why we need your help and why it's so important to seek out an attorney during this process. So let's talk about the current E-2 visa and what's going on there. Are there any legal challenges that have arisen in recent years that affect the E-2 visa process? Can you guys give us some insight on that?
I could briefly, there's hasn't been a ton of legal challenges, but there's been some kind of interpretation of certain things. I think the most important one was probably recently in December of 2022. So as I mentioned very early on, one of the requirements is that you're a national from a country that we have a treaty with, right? Some countries, some individuals get nationality. It's kind of similar in the way that we get E-2 for, the work permit that we get for the E-2 visa, which is that they get citizenship from another country abroad when they invest in that country themselves. And in December 2022, there was an interpretation that if you did gain your citizenship through an investing of that country, that you did need to meet a residency requirement, which basically meant that you were a resident of that country for 3 years. So that's kind of, the one of the things is you want to make sure, even though you have your passport, make sure how the client got their nationality. If it was through investment, you have that clarification with them, because you don't want them to have started they invested into a business a lot of money, and then maybe they have to wait. So that, that's a discussion you want to have really early on, if that's the situation.
That's really helpful to know. So let's talk about benefits and limitations. We're talking so much about this E-2 visa. Are there any benefits to obtaining this? Can we talk about the primary benefits of having the E-2 visa, and why somebody would want to get involved and get this visa?
Yes, of course. So basically, the benefits are that you're able to run a business, generate revenue, help the economy, create jobs. But obviously, other benefits that are, I guess, easier things to consider is that the E-2 doesn't have a cap like other visas have, where you could only file certain times of the year. You could file any time in the year once you have the requirements met. You can extend it every 2 years indefinitely. But if you extend it indefinitely, you have to show that it's not marginal. So if you file, let's say you already obtained a 2-year E-2 and you want to extend it another 2 years, you do have to demonstrate to either the consulate, if you're going to file it at the consulate, or with USCIS, that it's growing, it's either growing in terms of revenue, growing in terms of employees, that, it's generating enough revenue, like Jioselin said, to cover your salary, your personal expenses, work expenses, capital. And so that's a beautiful thing, is that you could extend it indefinitely. You could also, your family, I mean, that's a huge thing. A lot of times our clients ask us, well, I have a wife, and can she work? The nice thing about it is that recently the law changed that now the spouse having the E-2S, S as in Sam, visa, can work incidental to status. So as soon as they have an E-2, they can work. As a matter of fact, I always kind of joke around a little bit with the clients when I'm prepping them that an E-2 principal investor is only tied to working that business, right? Wherein the E-2S spouse, the sky's the limit. Basically, if the E-2 spouse wants to open a second business, it's completely unrelated to the E-2 investment business that the husband's working on, they could do that. They could be a contract worker, they could be a W-2 employee, or not work at all. So, the wife can also go to school. So even E-2 principals, E-2S spouse, E-2Y, that's what it is for the children, can go to school. That's a beautiful thing. Now, one little thing is like a little golden nugget, is that when a person actually gets a visa at the consulate, every country has what's called a visa reciprocity table posted on the Department of State. And what that is, that it tells you every country in the world. And then it tells you every type of visa that exists, like A to Z. Mostly every letter has a visa tied to it. So the E-2, if you look at, for example, E-2 Panama, it has the number of years they're going to give you on the visa, and that is 5 years. So if they give you 5 years, typically when you enter the United States, the port of entry, CBP, will generally give you the status to work in the United States for the life of the visa they give you at the consulate. So although if you read about it, it is a 2-year visa, you extend every 2 years, if you did it in the US. At the consulate, if it has a longer amount of visa life that they give you, they could actually give you that much status when you come in. And that's, let's say 5 years. Then you extend it after 5 years instead of after 2 years. So that's the nice thing about that. So in general, those are the basic benefits of the E-2.
That sounds like a very attractive opportunity and visa compared to some of the other options we have. I mean, being able to extend, submit your application whenever you want, that just seems fantastic. And then your spouse having the freedom and being able to either participate in that business or something entirely different. Those all sound like great perks to the E-2 visa. So thank you so much, Carmen, for that insight. That was really great to know. Let's talk about the opposite side of things. Are there any limitations or restrictions that we should know about that come with the E-2 visa? Could you guys touch on that a little bit, if there are any limitations?
Yeah, so some things that could be considered some limitations are, as Carmen briefly mentioned, how the wife has, the ED able to work incident to status. The principal, which is the E-2 treaty investor, their visa is tied to the business that they're presenting, right? So they don't have that flexibility to move to another employment. It would be then considered if they would have to apply separately for another visa in a different category if it's not a business that they're maybe a new business they're trying to start. So it's very tied to the business that they're actually operating. So that's kind of, that's the big thing, a big limitation. They don't have the flexibility to move as their wife or significant partner would. The other thing is this kind of visa is considered, there's two terms. One term is a dual intent visa. The other one is a non-dual intent visa, which basically E-2 is not a dual intent visa. What that means is basically when you apply for this visa, you have to submit a statement that you intend to depart the US after the end of your visa. And then you have to, most commonly, you prove ties to your country of origin. So if you have property, if you have bank accounts, all that connection, that's one of the things. So then the thing is, we get commonly kind of the flip side to that is like, well, what if I want to stay here long term, right? The reality, right? You're building a business. So that's really a discussion that we individually had with the client. I asked them like, what are your plans? What are your goals? It's really a case by case because that limitation is that you have to show intent to return. But then, so that's kind of the reality of that. So it's really a case by case on that situation.
So it doesn't sound like there are too many restrictions regarding this, but that's definitely something to look into. So thank you for that insight, Jioselin. Regarding family members, so we talked about using the E-2 visa coming here and then bringing your spouse. Could you bring other family members to accompany you on the E-2 visa? What does that look like?
Sure, I can comment on that. So yes, well, like you said, you could bring your wife and children under the age of 21. There is no other dependents that you can bring. Like you can't bring your mom or your dad or sister. It is intended only for the investor, and you can bring your wife and kids. Now, this is something we're not talking about today. Maybe we can talk about in another session, but you could bring employees that are essential. So as long as those employees are of the same treaty country, right? So let's say you have two different nationals who are the principals. You have one from Canada and you have one from the United Kingdom. So because each of them own 50%, as long as the investor, the principal, owns 50%, let's say of the UK, they can bring a UK essential employee who has UK passport. Okay, again, this E-2 visa is not about where you were born, it's where you were a citizen from. So Jioselin did touch earlier that you could have been born in India and became a Canadian citizen, then qualify for E-2, for example. So you could bring essential workers. Okay, so if your workers are your relatives, that's fine. Okay, but they have to be essential, meaning if it's, for example, a company that's like a physical therapy company, then the essential workers are physical therapists, right? So the physical therapists have to be from the treaty investor, 50% owner, same country of nationality.
That's really helpful to know that they can bring, children under the age of 21, and then, they have a few other options regarding that. So regarding the financial planning of this, there's obviously investment involved in this and a large commitment with finances. So how should somebody approach financial planning for their E-2 investment visa? Do you guys have some advice on that?
Yeah, for sure, Nina. So for financial planning, I think the important part has to be, whatever the funds are they derive from, as Carmen mentioned, there's different formats, retirement, savings, and everything like that. Make sure that they have the proper documentation in place, which is what we keep saying, like documentation is very important. So make sure that it is in place so that, they have that, whatever it is, if they have to get the money from a sale of property, then, they have to make that move. It has to be actually, physical cash money so that it's invested into the money. So if they do a loan, it has to be a collateral loan. So there's some restrictions on loans on that aspect as well. So that's really important. I mean, there are some clients that we have that are gifted money for their starting of their business, maybe friends or family. If that's the issue, there is a requirement that the gift, there has to be a letter signed for that purpose. So it's very specific as well for that. So, there's different ways that you could finance your business enterprise. So it's really a discussion of what the client has, and we have usually that discussion.
Thank you for those insights.
If I could just add one thing on that, is that we always tell the client to make it as simple as possible, because sometimes, let's say you're going to invest 200,000 and the 200,000 is 25 from my aunt who, just sold her property and she's loaning it to me. And then you have to show how she got it. And then, that if it's a loan from an aunt, you have to make sure that the loan that she loaned you have secured collateral that's under your name, something of value. Let's say you have a house, you're the investor and you have a house that you don't want to sell, but you have something that's maybe going to become liquid within a reasonable time that you could pay her back. So it's always just best to keep it as simple as possible. Maybe one source or two sources, but not, 3, 4, 5, that's where it becomes really complex, because you have to trace every little thing. And so it just takes a lot more time to do.
Yeah, but just to kind of add on, if it is that they have different, and I've had various clients that have various ways that they're that they're bringing money into their business, we do that with them. We help them, make it in the more simple form, so that, if it's 3 different ways that they, they had savings account, they had retirement account, they got gift, we make that clear so that still, it's a lot of work, but we make it as simple as possible to make sure that they get the case as approved as they can.
That's great advice. Thank you guys for covering that. That is all we have time for. I know we wanted to touch on a little more. So if you guys watching this like this topic, please leave us a comment that you want to see a part 2, and we'll make a part 2 for you and cover even more about this, because it is a complex topic. So there's so much we can talk about regarding this. Thank you so much, Carmen and Jioselin, for taking the time. That is all we have time for. So that does bring us to the end of our conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And to stay up to date, please subscribe and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If this video was helpful, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you can be notified of our next upload. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please email us anytime at info@chug.com. And make sure to join us back here next week for more pressing topics that truly matter to you and your business. Until next time, stay safe and take care, everyone. Thank you for joining.